Hello YouTube, this is DVD Review Studios here, and today I thought I'd do a brief discussion video on the series finale of Better Call Saul, along with sharing, some generalized thoughts on really Season 6 as a whole. And honestly, I really did love pretty much everything about this season. It definitely piqued in my eyes with the Lalo-related story, which was for sure one of the most brutal cliffhangers, where he visits the apartment to see Jimmy and Kim, only to murder Howard Hamlin for no reason in front of them both, who was literally just standing there to try and, intimidate the pair, but obviously things don't quite go to plan. That was a very unexpected moment, shall we say, and the couple of weeks between that episode airing and the follow-up episode were very difficult to say the least, since obviously everyone wanted to know what was going to happen going forward. But overall, I found this show really as a whole to be some of the best television ever conceived, up there with Breaking Bad easily, and in some aspects surpassing Breaking Bad in my eyes. Maybe a controversial opinion there, but without a doubt, both shows together some of the best television ever made. The rest of the episodes onwards really felt like the show was coming down ever so slightly from such a high, and I'll be honest, they've gained some mixed responses from fans and some really interesting ones at that. One thing in particular being the black and white aesthetic chosen for some of these remaining episodes. And this is something that I personally had no problem with. It was something that was introduced in the first episode of Better Call Saul, with everything relating to Gene Takovic, the persona that Jimmy or Saul takes on to evade the authorities thanks to the vacuum repair guy at the ending of Breaking Bad. And so it's something that we obviously knew we were going to see, but I guess we didn't all acknowledge that the remaining episodes set in that timeline would all be black and white. And with that in mind, it's something that, to be honest, I was kind of surprised to see a lot of fans were kind of ignoring that artistic choice. The obvious being that Saul Goodman was such a colourful character, to say the least, and once he was stripped of all that colour, living his life as Gene Takovic, his life becomes very much black and white, which can be taken quite literally. And I'll be honest, I also kind of like how the black and white stuff with everything set post Breaking Bad separates the series from flashbacks and the present-day timeline in Better Call Saul. And so anyway, Season 6, Episode 13, Saul Gone, the last episode. I really liked how this episode filled in the gaps for certain key moments and still successfully delivered on really the best possible outcome for Jimmy. The opening flashback was a huge surprise, adding a little bit more content to the incredible desert-themed episodes from Season 5 of Better Call Saul. Jimmy and Mike are still dragging that $7 million through the desert, struggling to survive, with no supplies, no water when they suddenly find water. And when the episodes were airing, I always found there was a little bit of a gap in the events that took place in those episodes between the pair getting to the service station and obviously the struggles that they endured. So at least this gives a little bit more context to how they survived that little bit longer, along with adding some interesting conversation between the two characters. And in the post-Breaking Bad timeline that we've been following, Gene is identified by Marion, the old lady, as Saul Goodman, the Albuquerque con man, and I wasn't really sure at first where their conversation was going from the last episode, especially when showing somewhat sort of violent behavior from Gene, and I was genuinely wondering, was he going to kill her? Was he going to go full Walter White? Thankfully not. He instead goes on the run. And looking at all the foreshadowing, I think this was really the obvious choice for how to write this into the story. And I love the way Gene is apprehended. He goes on the run with a small box of money, a burner phone, and the famous calling card of the vacuum repair guy. And he's hiding in a dumpster and accidentally drops the shoebox, only to then be held up at gunpoint by the police. And how did they find him? There's a really stunning shot that reveals a CCTV camera in the top corner of the screen, which must have obviously caught Gene climbing in. Some really great attention to detail there, and that's something that I do very much respect about both Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. And when Saul is taken into custody, I was really surprised to see actress Betsy Brandt brought back to portray the character of Marie Schrader, Hank's wife, we never really got to see much of her in continuation of Breaking Bad, especially after the big reveal of Walt having gotten Hank killed. And so, going crazy in his cell, Saul formulates a vague kind of plan that makes him somewhat into a victim of Walter White, but he needs a lawyer in order to pull this off. And who does he call? Bill Oakley from the earlier seasons of the show. Wasn't really expecting any of the earlier Better Call Saul characters to feature in this final episode, especially with the on-off relationship Jimmy had with Oakley. However, this felt like the ultimate troll on the poor guy, giving him a case that was basically unwinnable, and instead, Oakley and Saul talk down the crimes to a plea bargain rather than letting it go to trial, and surprisingly, the ridiculous pleas and, I guess, requests that Saul makes are actually honoured and agreed upon, which is really strange for something so serious in my eyes.
1 pint Bluebell mint chocolate chip ice cream every Friday for the duration.
Are you kidding? He's kidding.
Bluebell, mint chocolate chip, no substitutions.
And I'll be honest, with how serious this was meant to be, it kind of irritated me, this sequence in particular, with Saul really pushing his luck and being almost too smug for his own good. And I'd argue this is really meant to be how the character is supposed to be perceived and written at this moment, especially when he attempts to make one final sort of sell in relation to what happened to Howard Hamlin, as though he's going to strike yet another deal or maybe get more years taken off his sentence. But with no dead body to find of Howard Hamlin and the disappearance still remaining a mystery to those who, I guess, weren't in the know, it becomes enlightened news to Jimmy that Kim has already played this card. She has already confessed to what has happened, the only issue being that there's no evidence to really support what she is saying. And Saul has nothing left to bargain with since that has already gone out the window. In a way, it was kind of satisfying to see these facts get rubbed into Saul's face. And with that, we get another flashback. And at first I thought we had actually skipped ahead, with Saul being in prison thanks to this close-up shot of his face, and that the scenes were now in colour, maybe that the show had transitioned from black and white into colour. Instead, we have an incredible flashback with yet another Walter White cameo for this season, and this is part of the original Breaking Bad run, this scene, that we didn't really see too much of, with Walter and Saul, having been taken in by the vacuum repair guy, both end up staying together temporarily, whilst their new identities are being set up, and I always wondered what kind of conversations these two would have, and this kind of answers that question. They just argue like children almost, but then Saul asks an interesting question about regret, using a time travel metaphor, just asking what would you do if you had a time machine, what would you change? Would you change anything? And initially, Walt dismisses the question, sort of reading between the lines, just asking, you mean regret? Ask me about regret. I thought that was quite funny for the character, since he's always very blunt with that sort of thing, and he always looks at himself as being higher up than those around him. It's oddly a question that Saul keeps asking throughout the episode. We see this during the Mike flashback from the very start, and now here as well, which reveals a little bit more about the characters internally, the obvious ploy being how Saul is all about the money, and making as much money as possible. And so, how does it all end? Well, the final courtroom scene was pretty crazy in my eyes. Seeing Saul confidently walk into the room with the intent of accepting the overly generous plea bargain, only to notice Kim. And then it all hits him, all the horrible things that he is responsible for, and he publicly shreds the persona of Saul Goodman, until there's nothing left standing but Jimmy McGill. And this involves further incriminating himself, basically taking the plea bargain off the table, but as long as Kim is off the hook, that is absolutely fine for him. And so he confesses to the crimes in order to gain Kim's respect. And you can tell this sequence really does mean a lot to him. Looking back at the other seasons of the show, he lost the respect of his brother Chuck long ago, and although unexpected, there was one really great scene between Chuck and Jimmy for sort of one last time, which I really quite liked, as obviously a lot of stuff about his brother really does seem to trouble the character quite deeply, where he learns to kind of live and accept the consequences as to what he has done. And I also really liked this interesting shot zooming in on the book that Chuck was holding, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, which may have inspired the questions relating to regret throughout this episode. Anywho, I'm glad someone is facing up to their crimes within this franchise. Walter died a villain, Jesse ran away, and Jimmy chose the honorable way out. He knows what he did, the role he played in these crimes, and it seems really kind of cliche that he did this all for Kim, I guess in a way in the name of love, but I respect the character and the choices made for how he was written. If he'd gotten away with all of this, the ending would be, I guess, too open-ended, almost begging for a continuation, but this is a lot more solid in my eyes. And just like that, Jimmy goes to prison. It's a bittersweet ending, and arguably the most sort of realistic ending a character like this could have. It was kinda goofy having all the inmates chant "Better Call Saul" by the end, but I liked how they all really respected him. I guess they kind of looked up to him as someone that was fighting for their justice as a criminal lawyer. Hopefully, life inside should be kind to him. Plus, by the end, he does get a visit from Kim, and they seem to sort of patch things up. I love this last shot sort of replicating one of the earlier episodes, if not, I think the first episode of Better Call Saul. Subtle details like this really add a lot of heart to this show, and make it all the more rewatchable in my eyes. Overall, I felt this was a pretty solid conclusion, which I very much enjoyed. Do I think Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould will continue the franchise? Honestly, I think this is now truly the end for the Breaking Bad era, or at least that's how it should end in my eyes. We've had 14 years of phenomenal storytelling, and the whole thing is a gift of just pure entertainment. Breaking Bad was very much Walter White's story, El Camino was Jesse's farewell, and with Better Call Saul, obviously Saul/Jimmy is the title character, but I would argue, however, that a lot of this was really about adding more dimension to the side characters of Breaking Bad. What went on behind closed doors and how they all played a key part in the longevity of this overall crazy storyline. I think this is now truly the end, and in all honesty, the best sort of closure we are really going to get for all of these stories, and wonderful characters that we have followed over the years. Anyhow, that's going to do it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed. I will be reviewing the rest of Breaking Bad and all of Better Call Saul in the coming months. In fact, I've actually reviewed Season 5 of Saul a few weeks ago already, so I'll probably edit through that at some point soon to upload that. I don't really know if I'll review these seasons in order, probably not. But either way, keep an eye out on the channel if you would like to hear more thoughts and opinions on this incredible set of shows. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave me a like down below. Comment below, what is your favourite moment from the Better Call Saul series, and do you have a favourite character perhaps? And of course, for more content, be sure to subscribe.
Are you threatening me?